Are UFOs real? Does alien life exist?
These things are advanced cities.
These are advanced cities under the ground.
Yes, exactly.
They're among us, is what you're saying?
One of them he described as having white hair, and her eyes were too large, kind of like a hybrid being.
They were
Intraterrestrial? So define that for me, just for the layman here.
We were warned, either by God or a disembodied voice or a representative of God.
Extraterrestrial, but not from a distant star. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
We think that's what the breeding program is about, is to kind of infiltrate our society and change us from within.
Welcome. We are back for another episode. Glad you guys could join us today. And today I want to start with an important question. Are UFOs real? Does alien life exist? Our guests today may provide some answers. They both have co-authored a book called Who They Are and What Are They Up To? Please welcome Leslie and Stephen Shaw. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks so much for having us, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, your book is amazing. And I'm so glad I had the chance to read it. And everything I was reading from it gives the general hypothesis, and you hear this out there, and it's kind of been out there for years, that alien life, the alien life that people believe in, are much more technologically advanced than we are. Why is that?
Well, that is only part of it. We have a unique take on the whole thing about in our book who they are and what they're up to, especially because of my family's 4 generations of interactions with what we initially thought was a family spirit guide called O'Glegley, and we'll get into that. But it's not that they're really truly aliens. That's the different take that we have.
Our take is that these UFOs are being launched from terrestrial sources. They're not coming here from distant star systems.
Yeah.
And they're much closer relatives to us than people really understand.
We know the bonobos chimp is
95% the same as us.
Yeah, okay, and that's our closest relative.
Yeah.
And we cannot. There have been experiments to try and do like a hybrid, chimp human, and this that just doesn't work. So anyways, for our research has basically led us down to the fact that, especially with my personal interactions with my family, that we're dealing with something that is much, much closer to us, and actually really kind of a relative.
Yeah, when we first started researching the phenomenon about 20, for me, 30, he started 30 years ago, I started about 20 years ago. When we first started researching it, we realized pretty quickly that UFO theories and UFO facts were not lining up. They weren't making sense.
Right.
UFOs are seen worldwide 10,000 times per year, every year,
reported.
Going back many years.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, maybe thousands of years. Because we have, and that's another thing, we have evidence of their activities from thousands of years ago and now. So this phenomenon's been going on for a very long time. And when you think, okay, are they coming here from distant star systems? Just the numbers alone are kind of pointing not to that, to more like residency. And I mean, maybe their technology is so far advanced that it's just like opening their garage door and flying into our universe. It's just that easy. And it would have to be that easy for them to be coming here as often as they are.
Exactly. But then you have to look at, like, for instance, what we call the mom effect, the motive, opportunity, and the means, okay? If they really are so advanced, like some people are talking about being light beings and Arcturans and Pleiadians, okay, all right, and they're like maybe 1 million years ahead of us and, advancement in technology, then what the heck would they be so worried about the Earth? This makes no sense,
And so you say extraterrestrial, but not from a distant star. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
We don't call them
extraterrestrials. We call them intraterrestrials.
Right.
Intraterrestrial? So define that for me, just for the layman here.
Well, the Nordic aliens look exactly like humans. And we have lots of evidence that they're breeding with us.
They're among us, is what you're
There
saying?
have been reports of that.
Yes,
Yes,
we think they're infiltrate. We think that's what the breeding program is about, is to kind of infiltrate our society and change us from within. Yeah, we have evidence that aliens are among us, and but what we think, a lot of people have heard of the Admiral Byrd stories, his diary, where he went under the ice sheet and met with a people, men called the Ariani, who said to him, well, we normally have nothing to do with you people up on the surface, but we have to intervene now because you've broken the atom.
You split the atom, exactly.
So, and this is a power way beyond your ability to control it. So now we have to intervene, and we think that is actually what happened. So
they live down there, like
they
they're
live
residents of.
Yes, we have lots of testimony. That was another thing that wasn't fitting. We have hundreds of incidents of people seeing them coming up out of a lake, up out of the ocean, up out of a volcano or a mountain or a mesa or a ridge. They
in aircraft?
have underground bases that they can open up.
Yeah, we have to
windows and fly in and out.
We have to interject in here. It's like they're not like going down, like living in a hole. These things are advanced cities.
These are advanced cities under the ground.
Yes, exactly. For instance, we had one chapter in our book that we were actually surprised ourselves to find just how frequently these near extinction events or even L events have happened in our past. The ones that we've just discovered so far. That and I was a wild cave explorer in my early 20s, and I can tell you for a fact that living underground is actually a safer place to be.
Yeah, it's you can temperature control it as long as you have power, and we believe they have geothermal power in abundance. They can grow food down there. They can be comfortable, nice 72 degree, weather at all times.
What about the need for vitamin D though, like natural sunlight?
Good point. And I think that that is one of the reasons they're abducting us, because we think that living underground that long may have made their population less viable, and they might need regular infusions of DNA from surface individuals.
In fact, what we found too, like the myths and the legends of like the vampires
and the succubus
and the incubus, if you really look at it, how far back it goes before it became like a popular cult vampire, if you look at the whole alien abduction thing, it
really aligns
it's
with it.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
They come
at night.
They come at night.
They're powerful.
They paralyze you.
Paralyze you.
They take your genetic material.
They steal DNA.
And they can either make themselves invisible or change form.
And they're very pale. And
right. It's exactly the same. So chicken or egg, which one came first?
And Mike, we're not the first people to come up with the theory that we call them intraterrestrials. That's our word, but that really the UFOs are being launched by a terrestrial source. In fact, a Harvard research paper just came out confirming our theory on that.
A few months ago, yes.
But
a Harvard research paper confirmed what you guys just told me?
Yes.
Well,
correct.
Okay. Sorry. Let me.
Harvard researchers.
Yeah. It's not from the school itself, but two of researchers from Harvard and another guy from Montana University. These three men together wrote this report, and they think that it may also be attributed to a terrestrial source, a hidden terrestrial source, is the way they put it. And so this is we're not the first people to come up with this possible theory that they're intraterrestrials and launching from here. But I think we are the first people to attribute the cause of the separation of our humanity. We date it back to 12,850 years ago, when the Younger Dryas comet struck. The Younger Dryas was responsible for comet. It was a comet that hit in the Lake Superior area and other places, because comets break apart because they're big, dirty snowballs.
They're moving about 30 to 40,000 miles an hour, and this one was 62 miles
wide. So it's huge. And it came into our atmosphere and broke apart
in the northern hemisphere
and caused all these air bursts that caught all of the forests on fire at the same time.
In the northern hemisphere.
Yeah, the Uccello horizon is this charcoal layer. 12,850 years ago, the layer of charcoal laid down in 10 countries, 4 different continents. showing that the world was on fire all at the same time.
Yes, this is confirmable.
And so there's a little layer of that. And then there's a layer above that called the Younger Dryas boundary, which shows 1,100 years of drastic climate upheaval.
Yeah, so we were coming out of an ice age at the time, and then we were thrown right back into an ice age.
It reversed course and shoved us back into the ice age for another 1,100 years. So I think this was a big enough extinction level event coming that the people of 13,000 years ago, whom we attribute to have more technology than modern archaeology attributes, but so they're advanced enough to have advanced astronomy to the point where they can spot this thing coming. And we have these flood myths. There's like 1,200 separate cultures worldwide that have a flood myth in their ancient lore. And almost all of them begin the same way. We were warned, either by God or a disembodied voice or a representative of God, that a massive flood was coming. So we think somebody on the planet had advanced enough astronomy 13,000 years ago to warn the whole planet that, oh, we're in for an extinction level event.
Right.
And so, and we know that it caused a lot of extinctions. The mammoth was wiped out, the mastodon, the dire wolf, the saber-toothed cat, the American camel, the American horse. A lot of animals went gone right then.
Yeah, when we say that, it's like, it was probably like 95%.
And the Younger Dryas finally has been dated to 12,850 years ago.
In what's now the Lake Superior area, which was basically a giant ice sheet that went from Canada down to Georgia, roughly, at that time. But it was receding.
And in our book, we attribute it to the Hiawatha asteroid impact crater, which was discovered in 2016. But later, that was dated to 45 million years ago or so. So that was wrong. I'm sorry about that for our readers. But since then, so whoever's reading our book right now, wherever it says Hiawatha, mentally change it to the Younger Dryas.
Like I always say, okay, it was still Colonel Mustard with the knife. But it wasn't Colonel Mustard with the knife in the kitchen. He was in the dining room.
Yeah, the library.
Right. But it's basically, they're within 500 miles of the Labrador Sea.
Yeah.
It's basically the same area. It was in the northern hemisphere.
And the same effect would have happened where you'd have, it hit the ice sheet. It caused like a sleet storm going out in all directions and vaporized about, 1,000 gigatons of ice, I believe, up as to water vapor up in the sky.
In fact, it makes even more sense for a comet because that way comets, they basically break up as they're coming in. So it was
and you get your air burst.
It was an air burst, so it actually makes more sense that it was a comet than it was a meteor.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was this comet hit. It caused this mass destruction, and so prior to that, these beings that were, I'm just trying to follow the logic here, so
it's
just
the humans
just
that
work
are living
with
on
me.
the surface,
Right, went down because of that,
right.
And then that separate entities that have been seen coming up from the surface. Am I following the logic here?
That's correct. In order to survive this, it's kind of like that movie Deep Impact.
The haves and the have-nots.
Plan A in Deep Impact was to send these hero astronauts into space, but Plan B was to sink these deep underground arcs, they called them.
Yes, they called them arcs.
And they were going to put 50,000 people, our best and brightest, down there.
In the United States.
And our technology and our culture and our knowledge would go with them. So that's why these people are 13,000 years more advanced than we are. Because they didn't lose their technology. They went underground and kept their knowledge, technology, and culture, where the rest of us schmoes on the surface were almost wiped out to, I think went down to a population of about 10,000 individuals.
Yeah, recent data shows that we had what they call a genetic bottleneck. Because, the human genome is pretty simple. It's only 4 base pairs. So anyway, so we can track now that basically at that time period,
we should be a lot more diverse than we are genetically.
We were reduced to 10,000 or less surface dwellers. We know that the Aborigines in Australia, they've been around for over 50,000 years. So, and of course, the southern hemisphere was not affected nearly as much as the northern hemisphere.
Right, because it hit in the north, right?
Yes.
Right, correctly. So this all syncs up. And like I say, and also too, like Leslie's going to tell you in a little bit, what also happens afterwards.
Yes. So
Okay.
almost all the flood myths start the same way, and then later almost all of them end the same way. And the ending is that mankind was devolving into barbarism because it just knocked us flat, essentially. And the people on the surface, it looked like they were going to be just die out. And then God came, or another representative of God came to the people and helped them rebuild civilization. So in our theory, the people that were living underground, at some point they took pity on us, poor slobs on the surface, and came back to the surface, enough of them, they're called the Watchers, right? 200 of them come back to the surface, take wives, start having kids with those wives. Well, guess what? If they're having
And they
kids
look like us.
Yes.
with making love.
Right.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
look like us. They're
Like,
they're
right.
humans. They're not the
like
Yeah,
the famous stories of when the Spanish landed and met the Incas. Okay, like about the 15th or the 16th century. I can't remember exactly, but from their lore and from their myths, they said that their teachers and their gods were these tall white men
Caucasian
that
with
had
beards.
that had technology, and they basically laid down their civilization. And of course, they didn't know that these guys were also bringing syphilis and smallpox with them, and rats. But the fact of the matter is, they
thought they were gods.
They thought they were gods because that's what their gods look like in their legends.
Yeah. They actually have statues of the bearded Caucasian-looking men, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing, too, with that made us think it's not distant star systems, is
Right.
that the abduction phenomenon itself, the data that we were finally coming up with, there's been a lot of regressions work done by a Professor Jacobs, especially. He regressed like 10,000 abductees. So that's a nice big data pool to pull from.
Yeah, over 30 years, yeah.
And what we found was that they're mostly taking Caucasians. About 9 out of 10 people being abducted are Caucasian. The brain scans that the government has done on abductees proves that they are interested in people with psychic abilities. Abductees have the same kind of brains that people with ESP have or remote viewers have. So,
and the area of the brain is called the parahippocampal gyrus. It's it's in Elizondo's work. Well, the new book Imminent.
Yeah.
But we've always kind of known that, but not until recently could we confirm that.
Yeah.
And it shows that things like, for instance, like
for years we've attributed the psychic phenomenon is somehow connected to it, and because so many abductees also are. Oh, and I'm a psychic healer, or I'm an automatic writer, or I'm, some other kind of psychic.
All but one
And
woman.
so the beings then know this about their brain type, that they have that psychic ability. So this is something they are able to pick up on and know that's the species they want, not species, but the selection of that species that they want.
As an example, let's say, for instance, like we're listening to like 97.1 right now. We're communicating right now. We're listening to one channel, right? But basically, people that have abilities to have psychic abilities or remote viewing, or like what I have, we have a larger, what's called parahippocampal gyruses, and we can actually listen to, and we can communicate on more than one channel. Oh, and that's part of the thing of the communication is like, that's where the paranormal connection comes in, and that's what we have found, which is a little different.
And the fact that they always communicate with their abductees telepathically. So to me, that means that they have the same brain, same kind of brain.
That's right. And your book says that, actually. Right. Yeah.
So, we've heard so many reports of this too, where a person will be in their car or whatever, or outside, and they'll see a UFO going by, and they'll think to themselves, "Oh my God, a UFO!" And the UFO will stop and start coming towards them. The UFO is reacting to being seen. I think it's because they can sense the kind of brains in people that they're after just from a distance.
So those beneath are these UFOs being operated by those beneath?
Yes, except that we think that they use genetic engineering to create workers, and that these are the grays and the insectoids and the reptiloids.
I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
The big-headed,
Right.
like the other stuff you talk about in your book. Where does that fit into the equation? Those are clearly not
We've got a couple
human.
we've
per
got
se.
a couple of takes on that as far as the grays
Yeah,
go.
I mean, we'd love to be sure, but we think because the grays always are emotionless, and
Right.
even though they're inflicting terror and pain on their victims, they don't care.
But
Not at all.
they're telepathic. There's no doubt about
Right.
that. Okay.
So
And
we
that
think-
emotionlessness is portrayed in movies and pop culture, right? I mean, that's always what we've seen.
It's testimonial from the abductees too. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost all of them say the same thing, that they never show any emotion or care one way or another, whether they're terrifying or hurting their victims. And we think that, so let's say they have an underwater project they need to do. What we would do is create scuba gear for us to breathe and go underwater. In their case, they just create these kind of artificial beings, these
like
creatures.
a clone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
but these
like the
ones can breathe
reptiloids or,
underwater.
whatever.
Yeah, we think.
But we've also found too that this is only just recent data, which is true, that with our advanced lidar technology, that there is literally an underwater ocean subsurface that is relatively almost the same size as our surface oceans. So, it would be hard to believe that there wouldn't be entities or races or beings that hadn't developed subsurface. And, so we can look at the grays in a couple different ways.
Yeah.
That when we went subsurface, which is the safest place to be, and during, any type of cataclysm, that we may have come across them, and we may have made a deal with them, or basically we're just basically a little bit stronger
Well,
and
when
smarter.
we say we talk about them as cousins too. We
Yes,
say
we
our
talk about them as
cousins.
cousins, correct, yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
they are, they're close enough to us genetically to breed with us. So we call them cousins. We do have this one little hard kernel of DNA
Yes,
evidence
this is
about
fascinating, actually.
There's a man in Australia who wrote a book called The Hair of the Alien. He experienced it, and he got a ghostwriter to write his story.
Mm-hmm.
And his story is that he awoke in bed with two women on his bed with him.
Yeah,
and,
lucky guy, I always say.
And I know.
Watch it. Your wife's right there.
Yeah, I
Stephen.
know. But one of them he described as having white hair, and
Mm-hmm.
her eyes were too large, kind of like a hybrid being.
They were dark, and her
Like a
And-
gray. This would have been a gray.
she was
A
sort
hybrid.
of a hybrid.
Okay.
Her eyes were human, but too large.
Okay.
and her chin was
cheeks
too narrow,
was
and her cheeks.
kind of pointy on the cheeks and pointy on the chin. So, a kind of a
Like that stereotypical alien
Yeah, yeah. You've
that
seen
we see, right?
You've seen drawings and
Or like a couple of
paintings.
Hollywood actresses I could name.
look. Yeah, right.
Really. But so he describes her this way, and the other woman he said was a little more oriental looking. The next morning, he awakens to find a couple of hairs in bed with him, and these white hairs. And so he gets them analyzed, and they're actually not white; they're clear. And clear is unknown in the human type. We do not have clear hair. Even albinos don't have clear hair. But this hair was clear, just like fishing line. And it tested genetically as human, except a weird mix. It was Basque and Gaelic and part Chinese.
1% part
But,
Chinese,
yeah, like a subset
Mongolian.
of the Chinese population, like
Right.
1%. And so really odd, but human. So it's a mutated human, because it's a mutant hair, because there's no type known to man. And that's something I think we would gain if we went underground. We wouldn't need melanin in our hair anymore. We wouldn't need hair. And, the grays, we don't know for sure. We think they may have been part of the people who went underground, but And maybe the Nordic aliens, with our cousins, discovered them at some point and utilized their
the way we look at them is that they're an ancient culture that has probably been here longer than we have.
Well,
okay,
or they're humans that went underground.
Let me just stop you for 1 second. You said melanin. Don't we need melanin though? Don't we? Isn't that part of our biology? There's health benefits to having melanin. We make it in the sun, but it's beneficial.
Well,
so,
you also you look at for instance people that did grow up around the equator. Obviously, they have much higher levels of melanin because they need it as for a protection from the sun. But you go up into the north, you look at much less need for melanin. No, it's melanin is not nearly as important as like things like vitamin D. You know, we can get mineral deficiency and vitamin D deficiency. In fact, you know, the two main things with elderly people is dehydration and mineral deficiency. I mean, I was a doctor for 20 years, so I know this stuff like the back of my hand. All right, so melanin is something that nature basically, for instance, you see a person who is a black person, that they have a certain deficiency of melanin, and they get these spots that occur on their skin. It's basically where they basically don't have quite enough melanin. They have dark skin, but they have this like almost like an alopecia that happens of the skin, where you basically have this like loss of melanin. So yes, melanin is important, but not nearly as important as your minerals.
But we think that's one thing you would start losing if you were living underground.
Yeah, you wouldn't need it. Nature selects for what you need and what you don't need. Nature is wonderful. I mean, we don't like, you know, pay enough attention to nature. We really don't.
But that's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, Stephen. So, given your medical background,
yes,
if we look at all
for your listeners, he was an acupuncturist for 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we look at all the different health benefits being discovered now from sunlight, I mean, there's published research all over. If you jump on PubMed, there's different journal articles and different things that you can find that will specifically state that sunlight has so many benefits. Obviously, it's our natural source of vitamin D. We make nitrous oxide, which lowers blood vessels. Lowers blood pressure. It dilates blood vessels. There's so many different things that happen. It resets our circadian clocks. Now, you had both hinted that the health and resilience of those beneath may not be optimal. Do you group that with the fact that maybe they're not close to the sun?
Number one, I take nitric oxide on a daily basis because it does lower blood pressure.
Yeah,
and actually, after the age of 50, for your audience, after the age of 50, we stop naturally producing it to a great degree. So if you want to like avoid taking beta blockers and some of your Western medications for your heart, just take a good quality nitric oxide, which is different than nitrous. Okay, it's nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide.
Do you take that in the form of arginine, or how do you take it?
No, they're okay. Arginine is one part of it. There's citrulline and there's bacopa in a good nitric oxide. You have the bacopa, citrulline, arginine, and a couple other factors that create nitric oxide. And you should not be getting a flush. That's like the old quality ones that had, that would give you the facial flush. So a good nitric oxide will lower your blood pressure. In fact, I've got off one of my blood pressure medications because it dropped my blood pressure too much. Okay?
Really?
Yes.
And so is that all those different amino acids in one? Is that what you take?
Yes. There's a couple different products out there, but you just need to take one. It's like it'll take about 1,000 or 2,000 milligrams a day. And I want to get in real quick here. Okay, like for instance, the things as far as like what we found in cave exploration and that kind of stuff, how creatures adapt, that they become more translucent, they become more white.
Sometimes
they become blind, and
Really?
they adapt just fine without any natural sunlight. So if you look at a species given enough time, let's say this hypothetically speaking, the Greys, okay, what adaptive from nature, what benefit would there be to have a whole bunch of hair and to have dark skin if you're living in an environment where you already have a sea. And by the way, an underwater sea would have tons of natural nutriments. In fact, if you want to take the best thing in the world for vitamins and minerals, take a good seaweed extract. It's got much more than bee pollen. Okay, number one, I've known that for 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the sea is chock full of minerals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got everything you need. In fact, they've been able to use that in war times. They've been able to take seawater and use it temporarily as plasma. You know,
like
so yeah,
blood transfusion.
Yeah, for blood transfusion. Right. So you know, these are all things that we've been able to verify.
And that extends the blood supply longer.
Right. They can... Yeah. So vitamin D, certainly for surface dwellers, it would be absolutely necessary. But like I say, you know, nature adapts.
And you know, again, if you're coming from a distant star system and you're interested in humans, you would take a scientific curiosity. Say you would take a cross section of humanity. You wouldn't just be interested in one species, one race, right?
Right.
And so it made no sense to us that they were mostly taking Caucasians.
And we're only 16% of the world's population.
But if you look at these Nordic aliens, obviously they're a branch of the Caucasian race. So a branch of the Caucasian race would have all kinds of uses for genetic material from Caucasians, right? You could use it to infuse your population and keep your species going, or perhaps they use some of our genetic material in the creation of their worker beings we think they make. And so that's basically what we came across with the abduction phenomenon. It's like Caucasians. Why Caucasians specifically?
Yeah, the Italians are one of the first ones. By the way, you know, people think there's only been 2 or 3 crashes that have been recovered. According to Richard Dolan's work, it's more like 130 verified UFO crashes that have been verified. I mean, so like there's a lot of in Italy, in the mountains of Italy, there was like in 1936 or 35. They recovered a UFO crash, and Hitler was best pals with Mussolini at that time. Right. And then pre-World War II, he starts dedicating huge amounts of resources to the Queen Maudlin area of Antarctica. For what reason? Pre-World War II. But it's like they knew something.
In the late 30s, Hitler's U-boats are combing the coast. Mm-hmm. And one of his U-boat captains was quoted as saying, "I have discovered a paradise under the ice for our Führer and our homeland," kind of quote, right? So, then he starts sending all these materials to Antarctica, like ships and engineers and mining equipment and all these resources down to Antarctica. And so the Admiral Byrd story, most people have heard about the diary, but there's a Russian intelligence report was created and made into a documentary.
1986.
And aired in Russian TV on 1986. And in this report, they talk about Operation High Jump. Operation High Jump is after the war in 1947. I think the U.S. intelligence surmised correctly that Hitler had created a base under the ice sheet of Antarctica. And Operation High Jump, commanded by Admiral Byrd, was a armada or flotilla or whatever or carrier group. I guess
called
is the more
it a
modern
flotilla
word
at the time. Yes, it
was like 13 ships down there and a bunch of aircraft
and 4,000 men.
And they go to it's a 6-month operation and ostensibly supposed to be to destroy this base, we think. And they get down there and they're attacked by flying saucers that come up out of the ocean and attack the ships, sink a destroyer, down half his aircraft, his carrier-based aircraft,
and sank a destroyer,
and then back into the ocean. And we think after that Admiral Byrd didn't want to go back to Washington and say, I got my butt kicked by flying saucers that I know nothing about.
And
he flew into the.
Take for granted he and his co-pilot had just a few years before had already flown over the the Arctic, the North Pole,
the North and the South
Pole. This guy was an explorer at heart. He wanted to find out what was going on.
And so we think, and he was a Medal of Honor recipient, and the youngest admiral. And he was just a national hero, a man of supposedly unimpeachable character, right?
Yeah.
And so he flies this plane, and we now know that this hole exists. He says he flies down into the surface, under the surface, into this world under the ice sheet. And he describes, grassy fields, a woolly mammoth. As he's flying by, he sees a woolly mammoth. And then his plane is forced to land. They warn him. They say, we're going to, they come over the radio and say, we're going to take over your plane and land it. And they do exactly that. He meets with this master. It's this whole thing. The diary is online everywhere and can be read.
They call them the race of the Ariani.
They call themselves the Ariani. And according to...
What's the diary called?
Admiral
if
Byrd's
people want to
diary.
search it.
If you just search it out online, I found dozens of places.
And of course, there are people that are saying it's you always get the same thing. When anything that's like even getting close to the truth, they're going to say, it's been debunked. Oh, it's been debunked. It's like
it hasn't been debunked to my satisfaction.
No, it's like Sitchin's work. Sitchin.
It's been debunked.
It's been debunked. It's like
all 50 years of his work. 10 books, just throw them out. Throw them in the ash can.
The major reason is that people criticize Sitchin is because there's
he didn't have a PhD.
There are two British professors of the of archaeology, and that was saying, he didn't do a thesis on this. He didn't put in the paperwork at the right time, and they're saying, okay, so you're basically saying that all his work he did all over these books, just because he didn't go through the right channels,
he wasn't educated officially.
You're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater,
But he was a brilliant man. He could read in Hebrew, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Sumerian.
And this is all documented. It's like this guy knew what he was doing. Yeah, like anybody else, he probably got a couple things wrong, but you just don't throw the whole thing out.
For instance, he didn't know about the Younger Dryas comet. He knew that there was some cataclysm of some kind, but he didn't know what.
Right. Because we hadn't developed LiDAR yet at the time. We hadn't didn't have 5G technology.
And it was 4 decades ago that they discovered nanodiamonds in the Uccello horizon and the Younger Dryas boundaries. And that was the smoking gun for a celestial impact.
That was the kicker for us.
Because nanodiamonds form in no other way. A comet or a meteor comes into our atmosphere and brings dust particles with it. And those dust particles superheat to over 3,000 degrees. And then they form these little tiny round diamonds. Right. And and the Uccello horizon is littered with them. So once the nanodiamonds were discovered, we knew it was a celestial impact of some kind. And it just took us a long time to find the crater. And so when the Hiawatha was discovered, we're thinking, this is it, this got to be it. And it wasn't.
What?
And that crater you're talking about, is that the same opening that you're talking about in Antarctica?
No. So Admiral Byrd describes flying down into the ice world, right?
And it was just a visible opening?
Huge
opening. We've since discovered, and this is Linda Moulton Howe, who's kind of like the first lady of the ufology community. She's been a journalist,
especially like crop circles and cow mutilations.
And she's the one that she did a lot of work on Antarctica with whistleblowers, the military whistleblowers. She got to come forward. And there's a huge no-fly zone in Antarctica set up by the U.S. government, and it's very strict. No-fly zone, period. And why is a good question. Why? It's a wasteland of ice, supposedly, right? So why set up this really strict, no, you can't fly there? But there was a medical emergency, and this one military pilot decided to break the rule and fly through it.
With his buddies. He wasn't by himself.
But it was a very dangerous. In fact, the patient ended up dying. So they felt it was justified to fly through the no-fly zone. And when he was flying through it, he discovered that there's a huge hole. It looks like it's got a ramp down into it, and there's an enormous hole. He said it was 200, like 2/3 of a football field in size.
It was bigger than that.
Big enough to fly into, Wow. And so.
Yeah.
we have confirmation, so to speak, from a whistleblower who won't give his name.
Well, to preface
hope.
this is that he and his buddies had seen also like 4 or 5 saucer-shaped UFOs on a couple different occasions that were kind of close to that area that would like hover over like a mountain and then kind of stay there and then go over to another one, like, lightning speed.
He saw these disc shapes, he said, that were in formation.
And
when these things fly in formation, this is a UFO thing that for sure happens, that when they fly in formation, it's like they're locked, somehow energetically locked together and move as one. But then these UFOs can break away and go off by themselves. This has been seen many times where...
And so this is more like seamless than when you see those Air Force, that when they
like
fly
the Blue
and sink,
Angels
like,
and that kind of
almost
stuff.
like to perfection. Yeah, this is like more.
It seems like they lock together somehow energetically.
By far, because the Blue Angels can't move side to side and up and down in formation like that. They got to either they got to turn, or they got to do a bank turn, or they've got to continue. They can't change their height that easily. They can they have to it's totally different.
Yeah, they move like a plane.
Yeah,
the physics are totally different,
move
right?
at 2,000 miles an hour just a split second and then stop. Okay.
My first UFO, Stephen had seen 3 UFOs before I saw my first. And to be honest, I was getting jealous. I was like, I want to see one. And finally it happened. I was so happy when it finally happened. But I was in Joshua Tree. We were driving home from 29 Palms to our Yucca Valley home.
2005.
Through Joshua Tree on Highway 62. And I was driving. He was in the passenger side. And then there was a white light in the sky. I could see ahead of us through the windshield. And it was just a round white light, about double brightness of Venus. And it... At first I thought a plane maybe flying into Palm Springs Airport, but it didn't have running lights, the little blinky lights on the side, and it didn't quite fly like a plane. It sort of slowly moved into position in front of us on the highway, and as we're hurtling towards it, it seemed to get brighter and brighter. And I don't know if we were just because we are moving to it, or if we were moving towards each other. But then it took off north and gone over the northern horizon in a quarter of a second. It had to have been going, when I guess 20,000 miles an hour, say. And it was so fast that it streaked out into a line that collapsed on itself within that time frame. And
it didn't follow the typical pattern of when they the theory is that it's telepathic, and so they start heading towards you when you're conscious of them.
Maybe
right?
This was different. Sensed it with Stephen. Oh yeah, Stephen, we take him regularly.
Well, the most recent.
He's not new.
The most recent.
We know that guy.
The most recent one we saw was in 2020 when we moved to the current house that we're living in, and we just happened to go out on our back porch in 2020, just around Halloween, right?
I think it was.
Yeah, it was around Halloween.
I think it was Halloween.
We have a very, very small view of the sky. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really tiny yard with a high fence, and so it's kind of
it was 9:30 at night, and we're just going out there to kind of just enjoy the place. And there's this UFO, bright white and pretty big actually, and it was just like sitting there, just in the sky, and then it started doing
crazy maneuvers.
Its angular moves, and I was thinking, God. Should I go and get the camera? But I didn't want to like miss seeing it. And then it did its stuff a couple times, completely soundless, and then it shot off to the north.
And it was making like V turns at speed. That's something we just cannot do. When we want to turn an aircraft around, we have to bank around into a big U shape, But they can go at speed.
Yeah.
And when I say it took off at 20,000, it instantly went at that speed too. It was
we're just guessing, but what it is, it's something that human beings, the G forces alone, the inertia,
it would mash you against the wall.
No, unless you have an inertia counselor,
somehow.
Whatever. But the thing is, like what I saw as far as it's like they're saying, "Hey, Steve, we know where you just moved, and we're just saying hi," because there's just no reason at all for it's like there is a paranormal psychic connection with these, because number one, like I've tried to tell people because, I was a doctor. I also spent 6 years in the military from 80 to 86 as a CB. I've been on the C-130s. I've seen the black helicopters, by the way, which do exist. I've seen that with
the soundless
black helicopters. I know they exist.
Yeah,
so tell me about that.
I think we're reverse
Tell us
engineering
about that,
their tech
Stephen.
a little bit, and that's what these are. So
this is a June of 2005, and this was
way past your military
that was 80
career.
to 86, my military career,
okay.
right? So anyway, we were celebrating a friend's birthday at the Integratron, which some of your audience might know, which in Landers, California. It was made by George Van Tassel, Anyways, there also near the Integratron is the Giant Rock, which used to be the largest boulder in the world until part of it split. It's a very sacred place. They used to have UFO conventions there. So anyways, we drove up to...
Where is that in
Landers.
California exactly?
Just north of Joshua.
Which is...
North of Joshua Tree. Okay.
Okay.
So it's actually quite famous for people in the industry.
The ufology
there were 9 of us, right? And so we, a few girls started dancing, and we just thought out there by Giant Rock, and the full moon started coming up from the east, and I saw these 2 black objects that were in front of the moon, and I said, well, those are helicopters. I mean, I've been on helicopters in the military, so I know what they look like, right? And they came right towards us, about maybe 300 feet above us, okay, and absolutely soundless, okay. You couldn't hear a thing, and they literally made a turn around Giant Rock. That was their path, and then they went back to the 29 Palms military base, which I did duty on, by the way, when I was in the military. So I know that base quite well, especially Camp Wilson. So anyway, the only reason that we even knew they were there is because the moon was up. If it had been like a dark moon or whatever, the moon wasn't up, we would have had no idea they were there. Okay, so I know that we have that technology, that type of technology we have,
Right.
but we do not have the technology what UFOs do.
we can't take off at 20,000
No,
miles
we don't.
an hour.
We do not have that. Okay.
And they have been.
So how do you think they defy gravity? So how do they defy that gravity? Like, clearly there's the inertia.
They are using ley lines, and they're using the Earth's magnetic field itself.
We think.
In fact, if you really want to watch something that will blow your mind, whether you've seen it or not, watch the documentary on the Coral Castle. Okay.
And Bob Lazar actually put out a recent documentary too, which actually goes into what he thinks is they're doing. These are I always don't go down. I don't like to go down too much into their technology. I feel like a gorilla poking at a cell phone, right? Because I don't understand it, and nobody fully understands it. And this is all theoretical,
Right.
But Bob Lazar said that he thinks they have like a gravity negating field that it generates somehow.
Okay.
And that makes sense.
Well, what they're doing, okay, according to the Coral Castle, the guy who built this in the 1920s, okay, this guy was moving 20-ton pieces of coral at night when nobody was watching him. This guy was 110 pounds, and he was not using cranes because they didn't exist. And he said, he was quoted as saying, and I saw this documentary with my dad back in like 1979, 1980, and you can go and see this. It's in the southern part of Florida. And he said, I know how the Egyptians built the pyramids, and I am not going to tell humanity because
it's not ready for it.
It's not ready for it, and it's too dangerous. This guy was using the magnetics of the Earth's field to like do a negative wave instead of a positive wave, and make things almost like like light as a feather. Moving. It can move like cut out the coral or whatever, and he can move it. But he wouldn't let people know how he did it. He had this little tiny black box that mysteriously got stolen when he died, okay? But he said he knew, and this is something that you can go and see that was built in the 20th century.
So we think that he discovered how to do that. He had a PhDs in magnetics and engineering, I believe. So he figured out some way of negating gravity and
right.
And so that could be the same technology, or they're using something of
the
their
biggest
own.
Magnet in the
different.
world. The biggest magnet in the world is the Earth.
We don't know. We do know what some of their capabilities are. There was a mass sighting in. I keep forgetting the date. I think it was in '94 in over Lake Michigan. I like mass sightings better. When one person sees something, you could be mistaken, but when 300 people call the cops and say there's a UFO in my backyard, then we're talking about a real phenomenon. So, the cops reached out to the weather station, the national weather station that was right on the coast of Lake Michigan there, and the guy on duty, his last name is Bouchon. He clocked these UFOs that were moving in a triangular search grid over Lake Michigan. He clocked them at 72,000 miles per hour on National Weather Service radar.
Wow. Right.
So that's our most accurate,
estimation
of how fast they can go. It was pretty accurate.
That would literally break us apart. If we were in something traveling that fast, wouldn't we?
They've done test stuff like with test pilots that was done back in the 60s and the 70s, where if you get the 20 Gs, basically your eyes almost pop out of your body.
Obviously, they're negating inertia and gravity somehow.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do.
And they don't create sonic boom.
That's right. Also, that's true.
So they're not moving through our atmosphere the same way our planes move through our atmosphere.
Best that we can figure out is they cause some type of a bubble in front of them and behind them that doesn't create the same type of sound wave trauma that happens literally when you go too fast. It causes a boom, but they don't cause a boom, and they would have to get around that in some way, because even the machinery, even the mechanics in an airplane, you cannot stop an airplane that's going 20,000 miles an hour on a dime, because everything is still moving forward. All your equipment would be destroyed, let alone yourself. Yeah. So
it's like a locomotive. You can't just stop
it's not
on contact.
And that's their capabilities that are beyond us. We call them the observables.
Right.
Luis Elizondo coined this term. It's if they are doing things we can't do, then it has to be a UFO, right? These angular V turns is one example. High-speed angular turns, incredibly fast supersonic speed.
Transmedium.
They can go from space to air to ocean to space air to space, with no problem.
No visible means of propulsion.
Yeah. Yes. Right. They have zero. They don't have wings. They don't have exhaust.
And they can cloak. And they can cloak if they want.
They've been people have testified to them just disappearing right in front of them, and we don't know. But if you're moving at 72,000 miles an hour, instantly it might just look like that, right? But we do think that they can cloak because they've been seen cloaking on FLIRs.
Right. And exactly. Leslie's right. Many of the best observable reports have come from Navy pilots,
military pilots
that absolutely know what it's like to fly at Mach and above, and they actually know what we have. Like Fravor and Graves and the guys that reported in 2023 at the congressional hearings, and also Grush. I mean, we know that there's certain things that say, hey, we don't have this. I mean, we'd love to have one of those. That would be great. It'd be like having a 2024 Corvette.
Those hearings were really wonderful for us in the ufology community. It was a lot of it wasn't news. Grush said, "Oh, we have crashed ships and dead alien bodies." Yeah, we know. We know that for a long time. But what I did learn watching this that I didn't know before was that Ryan Graves, the pilot he was one of the East Coast pilots with the Red Rippers out of Oceana in Virginia. They say they see these orb things every single time they fly. And whenever they go out on maneuvers, these things are with them, monitoring them. Yes. So these UFOs, I call them the orbs, I think are like spy drones, what they use as spy drones. And they make up over 50% of UFO sightings. Graves described them as a 15-foot diameter sphere of clear glass with like a gray cube inside. And when they hover, this cube spins. And that gives this orb in the sky kind of a flickering appearance. If you go on Instagram or online, you can find thousands of people's videos of these little orbs, and it's just a round circle up in the sky with this kind of flickering appearance. And that's, we think, make up about 50%, over 50% of the UFO sightings.
And of course, probably 50% are fakes, but there are the ones that are the real ones, you know. So
it's so ironic that we've gotten to the point where we have a camera. Everyone has a video camera in their pocket these days, right? So I think that's one of the reasons that the government is being a little more forthcoming, is because there's just so much video out there.
Right.
But it's also gotten to the point where CGI is so good they can be faked and we wouldn't know it. So we never know if we're looking at something real or not, you know.
Yeah, once again, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
That's worse now.
I want to buy this.
Ever, I think, just in, you know,
yes, it is
coming
so
up
true.
on your social media of just these crazy things. I keep seeing on TikTok all these supposed planes on fire crashing into like Los Angeles, and it's like
Yep.
That I would have heard about
all
that.
fake,
all fake. So I mean, you don't know what to believe. But this is
and you know, and remember like the whole Game of Thrones thing with the big wolves, the dire wolves, right? I see all these videos of people walking flanked by either giant tigers or giant wolves or giant something or unicorns or something, and they look so real. You think, oh my God, are unicorns real suddenly? You know, but it's just that CGI has gotten to the point.
So this I need to ask you real quick. So you read the book, right? You read the thing about the coins, my coins being magnetized. That would be
Yeah, his personal experiences.
I mean, see, these are things that I experienced with my whole family in two different houses that were separated by 350 miles, and my dad and I could pick up these coins, and this being, this blue-white entity, 6.5 feet tall, that 6.5 foot tall, that, you know, I was told since the age of 3 that this entity was called Oglegli,
like the family spirit
guide that had interacted with our family bloodlines,
four generations at least.
4 generations and 4 different family bloodlines. First the Newmans, then the Rose, then the Shaws, and also the Griffiths. Okay, going from Germany to England to both North and South California. So anyway, I was expecting to see the family, you know, of spirit guide when I was 18. But the long and short of it is that 6 hours later, I, was going to go get some lunch for my dad and I, because we're cabinet makers, and I just pulled the coins out of my pocket, and all the coins were magnetic. These are standard American coins, and my dad could pick them up, I could pick them up. Didn't matter face or the edge or whatever. They were just like stuck together with jelly. But it wasn't like that. It was just, they were completely magnetic. 6 hours after it, physical proof.
Yeah, so we surmised that he was abducted as the family was being abducted at the time.
Because I blacked out after the entity left.
Had you ever blacked out before, Stephen?
Oh, many times. The phenomenon, that's one of the signatures of the abduction phenomenon is, I'm sorry to answer for him, but
you guys have a great chemistry.
It's
You've
like
obviously been married a long time. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, we're
it's great.
good.
You finish each other's sentences. That's cool.
All the time, I'm
it's
afraid.
Great.
And he reads my mind constantly. This psychic thing is no joke. His family are incredibly psychic.
Almost all the women in the family, apart from my aunt, were automatic writers.
Yeah, they
my aunt decided
trance,
aunt decided it was too creepy for her, so she didn't do it. My mom proved it to me on many different occasions, and she was absolutely right. In fact, I still get precog stuff myself. In the past few years, I've had 2 events. In fact, have you seen our documentary?
No, I haven't.
By the way. Okay.
Can you send it to me?
Let's talk.
Can you send it to me?
Absolutely.
All you have to do is go to YouTube and just type in who they
are.
Are
they? It's
or
actually
who they are, or
if you type
they.
either one, who they are or who are they, it comes up. I've noticed because I think that dyslexic thing where people mix it up a lot.
We've had 376,000 views so far.
Yeah, we're so happy thrilled with
in a short period of time. It was done by Sky Island Storytelling, and we weren't not really expecting to. I would have included maybe a couple other things in there, but that just means
but otherwise we're thrilled with how
they want to do a second documentary on us anyway. But we kind of we definitely talk about stuff.
And this is kind of leading to our own show. We've signed.
Yes, our own show's coming up very soon.
We've signed with Gnostic TV Network, and we're going to do a show called Abductions 101.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, congratulations. That's really cool.
Abductions 101.
Thanks.
the paranormal connection.
I know. I'm
That
so
is
excited,
exciting.
Because what we found is that for sure that there is a paranormal connection.
Yes.
It's not just all technology. It's it's just number one of the big tells to start with is why they can communicate with us so easily. In fact, my having been a doctor and an acupuncturist and a Chinese medical doctor and that kind of stuff is that people don't realize that the way the brain encodes information is not via language. Okay, like for instance, in any language, in all the 10,000 languages on the earth, when somebody says tree in Swahili or whatever it may be, you don't think about how to spell tree. You see a tree in your head.
Mind, yeah.
You see whatever tree that you are used to. And so basically all those neural pathways and those chemical neurons that are being activated, there's like these super highways when we're young, or when we basically lay down these super highways, because every real memory is always laid down with emotion, with intelligence. It's like when you become less emotional, let's say your neurochemistry, you're no longer like having as much testosterone or estrogen, or you're no longer as excited or inspired by life. It's just like, for instance, you hear something, and it's like when I taught acupuncture and Tai Chi, it's like, okay, you get this new thing you learn, right? It's like basically trying to paint over a kitchen that has all kinds of grease on the wall, which is the brain. And so, you try and paint over the grease and it doesn't stick. But when you're young, it's like you're taking like a knife and you're basically etching it in there in a kitchen that has no grease. So the thing is, the emotion is important. But like, for instance, like the English language is about 6 steps away from the way memory works. It's like you have to do this to this to this to this to this. That's why all the original languages are pictographic or Proto-Sumerian.
Yeah, even Sumerian started out at Proto-Sumerian, like hieroglyphic.
Exactly.
Looking,
So the thing is, the way the brain works, and that's why what we call them ETs, or we call them our cousins or extraterrestrials, they always communicate on almost always telepathically, because it's more primal and it's simpler.
And they don't have to learn 900 languages.
You don't have to learn 1,000 languages. I've come across people that say, "Oh well, I got this, this necklace around me, and it allows me to communicate in 1,000 different galactic languages." And I just look at the person without saying it, and I say, "Oh
yeah,
sure,
right.
Oh sure."
You're one of those people.
Yeah. If I were to ask you, say, okay, well, tell me how you say this in Pleiadian, it'll probably be some, BS thing, whatever.
And I think the general public looks at us kind of, they must be like that. But I think we have a pretty logical nuts and bolts theory.
Your book is,
and one thing I love,
well presented. I mean, I'm
Thank
not.
you.
I used to be. I was not a believer of this stuff. Then I turned more kind of agnostic, and the more I read, the more I see, the more and it's you're seeing it in mainstream media now. You have people like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan talking about this stuff, and the different experiences that people have, and the different sightings. And a couple years ago, I read that a pilot in Phoenix, a commercial pilot, saw something big over top of his plane, and it was national headlines. It wasn't even being suppressed information. So clearly
not as much.
Right.
They're still fighting us. They're still punishing whistleblowers.
But it's getting out there, and
it's slowly seeping into the nation's psyche.
There's a gaining acceptance that's happening that these phenomena are real, and so
the real turning point, I think, was the Elizondo article in the New York Times.
2017. Yeah,
he released 3 videos, the famous 3 videos now, Tic Tac, Go Fast, and Gimbal. And for skeptics who are still wondering, are UFOs real, I recommend looking at those 3 videos and reading up, especially on the Nimitz incident. The Tic Tac video was taken during the Nimitz incident.
In 2004.
Off the coast of San Diego, about 100 miles. And it was a carrier group with the USS Nimitz. and a few other ships. And it's one of the most well-documented UFO cases with, video evidence and
multiple witnesses, and there are actually
multiple planes.
We only ever see one, but there were actually like 9 of them. They couldn't get them all, and they went from like 80,000 feet down to just above the ocean floor in like a split second.
The Princeton had this. At the time, we had this new. It's called the Aegis, AEGIS radar system. It was new at the time,
state of the art.
And they thought, is it broken? And they actually rebooted it because they were getting such weird data. But it was showing a bunch of these objects up at 80,000 feet. And 80,000 feet is outer space, pretty much, And one of these things dropped almost instantly down to right above the ocean level. So fast.
Yes.
And then they had planes out on maneuvers, and they sent them over to a real world event, they call it. Stop doing your drills and go check this out, please. And when they get there, they see a Tic Tac, 40-foot long Tic Tac flying right above the ocean, this roiling ocean, looked like something was under it. And they tried to engage the thing, and it shot away at
60 miles. It was like within a split second. It was 60 miles.
They clocked it at 3,700 miles an hour. And
that was a slow one.
Yeah, that
it sounds like it.
And it appeared on radar 60 miles away. And then they sent the planes. The next batch of planes they sent over to the new location. 6 different pilots engaged these things.
Right.
And the first two pilots tried to take video of it, but it was jamming their equipment.
Really?
Right.
And so, yes.
In fact, we found that the best way to take pictures is using analog type stuff,
like manual,
manual
settings,
like an old Bolex camera or something that this is using digital. Apparently,
because they can't jam that because it's spring loaded, operated. Yeah. But when Commander David Fravor was one of the pilots that was at that hearing, and he was the first one to see the Tic Tac. When he went back to the ship, he told the next 2 pilots, he said, if you want to record it, you have to use the manual settings on the record devices. And that's where the video comes from.
So they actually were able to capture
the next 2 guys that went out, they were able to get it on.
They were able to capture it.
Yeah, I've forgotten the guys' names, but I remember the first two pilots, Fravor and Dietrich.
I hate to say this, but
Alex.
we're out of time. I had
I've been looking,
list of questions, and we didn't.
I'm
it's
sorry.
great. I mean,
we can do it
might
again
have to.
sometime.
That was what I was hinting at, is that we need to continue this conversation because there's so much more I want to cover. But I really appreciate you guys being here and sharing all your insights. And where can people find you and get more familiar with you guys? I know you got a show coming up, which is very exciting, but let us know, how can people find you?
Okay, first of all, the book again is Who They Are and What They're Up To. The documentary is Who Are They? And
it's on
YouTube right now, but it's going to be on other platforms.
It's going to be on Amazon soon and things like that.
We're going to be giving a lecture, and it's free, so if you want to attend, at the 29 Palms Book Festival.
November the 8th. In
29 Palms, 3:30 November 8th at the 29 Palms Community Centers, where they're showing doing the lectures. And this big festival should be fun.
And then our Instagram profile is...
Oh, yes, IG. I have all our experiences typed into series if people want to hear more about that. And that's on at leslie.shaw.author. Leslie, Leslie spelling.
Also the same on Facebook, too.
And Facebook, too. And Steven's music we have posted there.
Yeah, I channel that
if anyone wants to know that. Listen to his original stuff. And then we've got our show coming out on Gnostic TV. We think about mid-November, and it's going to be called Aliens 101. Abductions 101.
Abductions 101.
Sorry.
The Paranormal Connection.
Yeah, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection is the sub.
Well, we will include all that in the show notes, and I'd love to have you guys back if you join us.
the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Just make sure you have the questions you want specifically answered, and we'll.
And maybe we'll give you time to ask them.
Yeah,
that's great. No, appreciate you guys, Leslie and Stephen Shaw, authors and ufology experts. We appreciate you guys being here. Make sure you check us out at mikecpodcast.com and leave us a comment. Do you have any experience with UFOs? Have you seen them? We want to hear from you guys, and we appreciate you all. And until next time, bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Live long and prosper.
The Mike C. Podcast.